Hello, everyone. It's David Ault, and I want to welcome you to The Gathering. If you are finding your way here for the first time, welcome. Again, I want to invite you to go to my YouTube channel, David Ault, and there are playlists there. There's one called David Ault Talks, and explore that. And it is my hope that you find something of value there for you. But thank you again for being here. Today, I want to show you a little bit of my process. It's a hybrid of blending contemporary wisdom with the teachings of old, the sages and the wisdom people of the past, and kind of seeing what it means when we hear there's nothing new under the sun. That's not anything derogatory. I actually find that very helpful because it tells me that even in my present seeking, even in my present learning or unlearning, that what I'm receiving has been around forever. It just means that right now in this moment, I happen to be receptive to it. Maybe you'll find that to be true for what we talk about today. So the contemporary wisdom that I'm very much enjoying is called Atomic Habits by a gentleman named James Clear. Perfect time of year to pick up this book, by the way, January. Bottom line, James Clear says you might want to rethink this whole goal thing. If you've been a goal-oriented person, he describes very meticulously and very insightfully the way in which goals can leave us a little bit deflated, particularly after we achieve one and then we're like, well, what's next? And we get in this repetitive loop of having to keep doing this. And sometimes, more often than not, we don't make the goal. And so what is the language, the inner talk that is happening when that happens? He suggests something different, and that is to decide the type of person you want to be. You might want to write that down or get this book. Decide the type of person that you want to be. That's number one. And then number two is prove it to yourself with small wins. Prove it to yourself with small wins. Case in point. So he says, for example, who is the type of person who could write a book? Who is the type of person who could write a book? So juxtapose that with the goal of this year in 2023, I'm going to finish my book. Okay? So instead of that, he's saying, what is the type of person who could write a book? And he offers an example that they are someone who is consistent and reliable. So now the goal isn't about finishing the book in 2023. It's about establishing small wins of being consistent and reliable. And then enveloping that into the desire to write. Not necessarily to even finish the book, but to be a person who writes. So what I've done with that, because I'm writing a book, and I have butted up against all kinds of things that have not been self-loving with regards to the process. I'm not going to talk about that now. But what I've done is I've gone to my calendar, my daily planner, and I have made an appointment as a writer. So the small win is I show up for that appointment. I'm consistent and reliable with creating X number of appointments in the week to go and be the type of person who is the writer, to go and meet the writer that is within me. Do you see the difference? And he's saying that by proving this in these small wins, that's the atomic habit, that we do become that type of person. And it's a much more compassionate and holistic approach to navigating the world. I love that. There's so much good in here. And so I can't suggest this enough. My partner and I are reading this because we want to be the type of person who is well read. So the small win with that is we put our phones down, less social media, and we sit together and we read every day. It doesn't matter how much we read. It isn't about the quantity of what we're reading or how many books we're going to finish. It's about developing the small habit of reading every day. So I appreciated that. Now, when I think about what he's saying is, what is the type of person that you want to be? That reminded me of one of my favorite New Thought metaphysical teachers by the name of Neville Goddard. He used to go by just his first name, Neville. This is an anthology of all of Neville Goddard's writings. When I was a platform minister for years here in Atlanta, I spent an entire summer working with this book. It's called The Power of Imagination. It is titled that because Neville Goddard's base teaching was about the development of human beings' imagination, the infinitude of the imagination, the boundlessness of that. So Neville Goddard's favorite word, in my opinion, was the word assumption. Not an assumption from a negative context, but the root of assumption, which is to assume. And he would say, assume the identity of the person who has the wish fulfilled. Did you follow that? Assume. It is the practice of assumption, of assuming the behavior, the mentality, the physicality, the routine, the practices of the person who has fulfilled the wishes or the desires of their heart. Act as if. Become that person in the full embodiment of your whole system of behavior. I came upon this one chapter in this anthology. This is an anthology, again, by the way, of all of his works combined. I can't recommend it highly enough. He says this is a practice that Neville Goddard would suggest at the end of a day. I'm going to do some switching of gender here so to make it gender neutral. But he's talking about revisioning at the end of the day as you're going to bed, as you revision or re-examine your day. He said revision is of greatest importance when the motive is to change oneself or to assume the identity of that which you desire. When the longing is to awaken the ideal active spirit of forgiveness. Why is he bringing forgiveness into that? Because his suggestion, his idea is we can't fully play in this practice if we're not forgiving of self. If we are condemning of self, then all of our attempts at doing this type of mental readjustment is impotent. We have to have at the very core of the practice a deep self-appreciation and love for who we are. We have to be champions of our beingness. And so without imagination, one remains a being of sin. What is sin? Sin is missing the mark. Without imagination, one remains a being who is constantly missing the mark. We either go forward to imagination or we remain imprisoned in our senses. We remain imprisoned in our senses. We either go forward using this tool of imagination, which is inviting us to play with assumption, to assume the role, the self-talk of the one who has the wish fulfilled and desired. Or we're left to the devices of all that critical thinking and critical voice, the inner critic that is constantly bombarding us with not being good enough. And so to go forward with imagination is to forgive. Forgiveness is the life of the imagination. Did you ever correlate those two? Forgiveness is the life of the imagination. If I'm going to play in the arena of imagination, I've got to first forgive any any discretion or any labeling or identity that is less than within my own being. So the art of living is the art of forgiving. Forgiveness is, in fact, experiencing in imagination the revised version of the day. Whew. If you didn't like what happened today, if you didn't like what you did this day, then nothing can move forward, if you will, or nothing can bring us more into the embodiment of the reality of who we are as a sacred being if we don't revision the day with forgiveness. So every time one really forgives, that is, every time one relives the event as it should have been lived, one is, quote, quote, born again. This whole context of the scripture, Father, forgive them, is not the plea that comes once a year, but the opportunity that comes every day. The idea of forgiving is a daily possibility, and if it is sincerely done, it will lift us higher and higher to levels of our being. He says it's like a daily Easter, and Easter is the idea of rising transformed. That is what is before us as a continuous process. Freedom and forgiveness are linked. So Neville is using biblical language, biblical references, because that's his background. But he's saying and offering the same suggestion as James Clear in Atomic Habits, with this idea of who do you want to be? And to assume that role with atomic, micro, little steps, and being faithful to those steps every day. I love that. And then the third one and the final hybrid in our lesson today is this classic, Autobiography of a Yogi, with Paramahansa Yogananda. Considered to be the man of the East who brought the yogic wisdom to the West. One of the first people to do that. Powerful book. I can't recommend this enough. But I found this quote from Paramahansa Yogananda that said, "The greatest sin is to call yourself a sinner." So again, watch the way in which you respond to this language. The greatest sin, Aramaic definition of sin, missing the mark. The greatest missing the mark is to call yourself someone who constantly misses the mark. He says the greatest sin is to call yourself a sinner. You are a child of God. Though gold be covered with mud for centuries, it remains gold. So the pure gold of the soul can be covered over with the mud of delusion for eons, but in its true nature, it remains forever undefiled. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful? Is that worth reading again? I think so. The greatest sin is to call yourself a sinner. You are a child of God. Though gold be covered with mud for centuries, it remains gold. You and I, no matter what covering of mistalk we have layering our essential golden nature, we're still gold. So the pure gold of the soul can be covered over with the mud of delusion for eons, but in its true nature, it remains forever undefiled. I think you see the congruency here with this contemporary wisdom of Atomic Habits and the ancient teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, and even the more the timeline teachings of Neville Goddard. We're all saying the same thing. What we have before us is the opportunity to uncover the delusion. And what is the delusion? That you and I are separate from that which is the divine design, God. That what we are is a part of an organism. We are enveloped in that perfection. We are in physicality. We are in a plane of form. of dualism. And so the game is to be in the dualism, but to remember all the things that we just talked about. That just because you and I are bombarded with the talk and the oppression and the identity and the scorecard keeping and even the ancestral lineage of forgetfulness, that still what we are at our core is gold. All that we have to do at any moment is to begin to assume the role of that which is connection, to assume the role of that which is undefiled, assume the role of that which is the God nature of who we are. How do we do that? Well, I want to take you back to this guy and to begin to identify what is the type of person that you want to be, and now practice small things every day that support that. Do you see? And so if you want to be, we have all these human desires, so I want to be someone who's healthy. So that's a desire about this physical body. So I'm going to assume things. I'm going to make decisions every day that are congruent with the identity of being someone who cares for themselves. But I want to take it even deeper with regards to the spiritual identity of who we are. And that is that I am love personified. I want to assume the role of someone who is love personified. What does that mean? That means then that wherever I show up in the world, I bring love. Wherever I or whomever I encounter in the world, I am permeating love in that environment in such a way that everyone is influenced by that. You can have a lot of fun with this. Sitting down and going, okay, my humanness wants to be this. This is the type of human I want to be. And this is the type of spiritual being I want to be. How do I create a cooperation? How do I create a hybrid with that? So there's so much here. And I think the real game and the real message today is, how can you do this differently so that you and I are not in a cycle of self-defeatedness, but that we are doing these little incremental, beautiful agreements, keeping appointments with the true identity of who we are. I think this is an exciting way to approach the new year. And so I want to encourage you to look at this book, Atomic Habits. I want you to read more. If you haven't read Autobiography of a Yogi, or if it's been a long time, pick it up. And Neville Goddard, just look at a few of his things, and I think that you will find that his writings and his encouragement about the potency of imagination is very, very enlivening and enriching for your soul. Thank you so much for being here. God bless. Till next time.